Hey Playas, how you doing? Welcome back to Playas Guide. Are you finding that video games are more expensive than ever to collect for? Well, you could be right, but I got 3 things that you could do about this. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel. One small click from you is a big deal to us on Playas Guide. You can also find Playas Guide on Instagram and Twitter. And there's nearly daily retro gaming content over on the Playas Guide Twitch channel. We got a whole team of streamers over there. But what you want to know is what you could do about the ever inflating prices of video games, because it just seems to keep going up and up and up. Now, I did talk about whether there's a bubble or not, but regardless of that, I got 3 ideas here, 3 different concepts that you could use in the current market. And what you're going to have to do is adapt and adjust to this market, and that means shifting your collecting habits. So, something to consider is, what are you collecting? Are you going for a complete NES collection? There's a lot of people doing that. There's a lot of people who have done that and aren't willing to sell those games. And because of this demand, the prices for many of these games are through the roof. Now, I've also done a video before, and I'm going to link it at the end of this, about nostalgia factor, because we could kind of see from nostalgia factor some of the trends in video game collecting. And you could adjust your collecting habits around those by maybe kind of being ahead of the curve for collecting, or collecting for a console that is less popular. Here's some other ideas for collecting. Maybe there's a certain publisher or developer that you really like, or a certain series of games, or style or genre of games. So for me, I really like shoot 'em ups, and I really like the Super Nintendo. So for a while there, I was going for all the different shoot 'em ups on the Super Nintendo. But you're probably a little bit smarter than me. That wasn't really the best choice. That's probably the most expensive genre to collect for, especially for that particular console. But that's just an example. Another good example is, I like Contra. I like Mortal Kombat. I like Crash Bandicoot. I like X-Men. I like Mario Kart. And guess what? I have every game for those different game series, or, that games were made of, for those franchises. So that's something you could do. I recently completed, about 2 years ago, the Twisted Metal series, and that one was pretty cheap to collect for. Those games have gone up a little bit, but they're still pretty cheap if that's something that you're interested in doing. Whether you're new or old to collecting, maybe you've done that, maybe you're already doing that because you've had to shift your habits. For newer collectors, more and more of them are reselling. And the reason they do that is because they can buy a lot and sell off duplicates while bulking up their collection. And, I mean, at some point we've all sold something, so we've all resold. And I really don't see anything wrong with it. And trading. I mean, if you have something that somebody else values and they have something that you want, why would you not make a trade? I know at one time I made a trade for a copy of SWAT Cats for L'Empereur on the NES. Now, at the time, that was a great trade, because L'Empereur was a very hard game to find. It still is. Nobody wants to play that game and doesn't care about that game, so it hasn't gone up in value. SWAT Cats, there was about 3 copies available locally. I think one at one game store was $20, and another game store had 2 copies for $15 each. So for me, it was easy to get my hands on a copy of that game and trade it to another person for a game that was valued at around maybe $30 or $40 at the time. It was a great trade. I needed that game. But I mean, hindsight, now looking back, people really view SWAT Cats as a very rare game on the Super Nintendo, and nobody gives a shit about L'Empereur. So maybe not the best trade, but I have had some other good ones. Something that I did trade before was some Battle Beast figures. If you're familiar with toy collecting and Transformers, you might know of these toys from the 80s. I traded 3 or 4 of them for a copy of Sculptor's Cut, and that game was in very good shape and has not gone down in value a bit. It's just continuously gone up. So I have had good trades, have had bad trades, but it is one way to get things you want for a cheaper price. And you're helping out somebody else in the collecting community. That being said, I touched upon toys there for a minute. Maybe you're not a big toy collector, but you're out at thrift stores, flea markets all the time, just scrounging the value bins, looking for a bargain. Well, you're probably coming across some toys, books, board games, old VHS. Consider looking into these different collectibles because there is a collector's market for almost everything. And if you could find some value in some of those items, you might be able to resell those items and then fund your video game collecting. Because I know I've done that and it's worked out very well for me in the past. Because sometimes you are buying those lots of, there's games, you don't really want to resell. You kind of want to hold on to them. So those are some resell strategies that a lot of newer collectors might be interested in or they're already using. You could use it if you're a long-time collector too, but something to also consider if you already have a massive video game collection is scaling back and the quality of your collection. Maybe it's worth it to sell off a bulk amount of common games or games that you just don't care about in order to get the few games that you've really had your eye on or really wish you did have in your collection. And then you have more space too in your game room in the long run. I know I've had to scale back and really cut the fat and just keep the collections and the games that I really want because I just don't have the space to just bulk up. That leads perfectly into our third concept, which is just to stop collecting altogether. If prices are too high and you're struggling to buy the games that you really care about, maybe it's just not worth it for you to continue to collect. Or you come up with a budget, say $20 a week. You could go to the game store, flea market, wherever you're buying your games, eBay, and you limit yourself to that $20. And if that's not enough, then you put that money aside and you let it build up and compound until it is enough to buy whatever it is that you've had your eye on. Because doing this really does make things more attainable. And in the long run, here's the other thing too. Take a moment and just step back, stop and look around and appreciate what you really have. Because if you're a video game collector and a gamer, there's probably quite a few games that you could revisit or you maybe have never even played and they're just sitting there in your backlog. So just maybe cool it with, the Instagram and the pickup videos because maybe it's too much for you. You're watching this video because you probably agree that, some of the prices in the video game market now are just insane or too expensive for you. It's not worth tapping out because you really enjoy collecting and video games. So just, take your time and realize that the collection grows over time. So myself, I've been collecting for over 20 years, and now I'm trying to scale back because I just don't have the space to, just hoard games, essentially. I got to look at what I really value. And I think everybody gets to that point eventually where they have to either sell some stuff off or scale back or cool off a little bit. So, maybe you're not there yet and you have certain goals and you want to take an aggressive approach. That's okay. But just be mindful that, the long term, you can just enjoy the journey of collecting and you'll get to where you want to go eventually if it is something that you're truly passionate about. Well, that's it for this episode of Playas Guide. I want to talk about something a little different that I think a lot of us can relate to and I don't really hear a lot of people talking about, or they're just complaining if they are, and that's not going to get us anywhere. We know complaining is not going to make the retro gaming bubble burst. In fact, if there's enough people that feel this way, that means there's enough interest to keep the prices escalating. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the flip side.